Tanya spent the day in a state of nervous anticipation. She cleaned her small apartment, not because she thought the alien delegation would care about dust, but because she needed something to do with her hands, something to distract her from the enormity of what was happening. Vex watched her with those unsettling red eyes. "Your heart rate is elevated, your breathing shallow, are you afraid?" "Of course, I'm afraid," Tanya said as she aggressively wiped down her kitchen counter. "I'm about to meet alien vampires who until recently were planning to invade my planet and drink my people's blood." "Not drink," Vex corrected. "We absorb the experiences through a process your science has no word for. The blood itself is merely a carrier." "Not helping," Tanya muttered as the sun began to set. Tanya found herself standing at her window looking up at the darkening sky. Somewhere out there was an alien ship coming for her. She felt impossibly small and yet somehow central to something momentous. "They are here," Vex said suddenly. Tanya turned. "I don't see anything." "Our vessels do not require your eyes to see them," Vex explained. "They exist partially in what you might call folded space." A moment later, there was a shift in the air, a subtle change, in pressure that made Tanya's ears pop. 3 figures materialized in her living room, tall like Vex with the same obsidian skin and red eyes. But where Vex wore simple dark clothing that might pass for human fashion at a distance, these new arrivals wore what appeared to be living armor, plates of iridescent material that shifted and moved as if breathing. The tallest of the 3 stepped forward, its eyes fixed on Tanya. "This is the human with the adaptation." It wasn't a question, but Vex answered. "Anyway, yes, Commander Nix, this is Tanya Morgan. Her blood carries the void between stars." The commander approached Tanya, moving with that same unsettling grace that Vex possessed, too fluid, too perfect. She leaned down, her face coming close to Tanya's neck. Tanya forced herself to remain still, though every instinct screamed at her to run. The commander inhaled deeply, then recoiled much as Vex had done that first night. "Extraordinary," she said, her voice deeper than Vex, with an odd resonance that made Tanya's teeth vibrate. "I have never encountered such a thing." One of the other aliens stepped forward, holding a device similar to the one Vex had used to analyze Tanya's blood. "With your permission, we would take samples." Tanya looked at Vex, who gave a slight nod. "Okay," Tanya said, "but I want to know what you're looking for. What you're going to do with the information." The aliens exchanged glances, communicating in some way. Tanya couldn't perceive. "Reasonable," the commander said finally. "We seek to understand the nature of your adaptation, its prevalence in your species, its origins. If enough of your kind carry this trait, it would make an invasion impractical." "And if they don't?" Tanya asked. "If I'm just a rare exception," the commander tilted her head, studying Tanya with those unsettling red eyes. "That would be unfortunate for your species." The testing was more extensive than what Vex had done. The aliens extracted not just blood, but skin cells, hair samples, even a scraping from the inside of Tanya's cheek. Their technology was bewildering, devices that seemed to shift and change form as needed, organic technology that blurred the line between tool and living thing. "Fascinating," said the third alien, who had introduced herself as Lix, apparently their scientific specialist. "The adaptation appears to be linked to a specific genetic sequence, one that approximately 30% of your species carries." 30%. Tanya repeated. "That's billions of people." "Enough to make feeding problematic," Commander Nix agreed, "but not impossible. The distribution would be uneven, concentrated in certain geographical regions. But you can't tell by looking at us," Tanya pointed out. "You would have to test each person. You couldn't just avoid certain areas." The aliens conferred among themselves, speaking in their clicking, whistling language that hurt Tanya's ears. Finally, the commander turned to her. "You make a valid point. The risk would be significant. Too significant. For a standard harvesting operation." Tanya felt a surge of hope. "So you won't invade?" "The standard approach would be ineffective," the commander acknowledged, "but there are alternatives." The hope died as quickly as it had bloomed. "What alternatives?" "We Could target only those we confirm lack the adaptation. Lix suggested. It would be slower, more methodical, but still viable. Or we could develop a counteragent, said the third alien whose name Tanya hadn't caught, something to neutralize the adaptation. Tanya looked at Vex, who had been silent throughout this exchange. The alien who had first discovered her seemed troubled, her red eyes dimmer than usual. There is another possibility, Vex said suddenly, one that does not involve feeding on humans at all. The commander turned those burning eyes toward Vex. Explain. Humans produce art, literature, music. They create experiences in external forms that can be consumed without harm. Vex said, I have observed this during my time here. Their creativity is extraordinary. You suggest we feed on their art instead of their blood. Lix said, her tone suggesting she found the idea absurd. The experiences would be diluted, imperfect, but abundant, Vex countered, and without risk, without the need for invasion or subterfuge. We could trade, exchange technology, knowledge, resources for their creative works. The commander seemed to consider this an interesting proposal, but untested. We do not know if their external creations would provide sufficient nourishment. I can show you, Tanya said suddenly. All eyes turned to her. I work at a bookstore. I have access to hundreds of books, movies, music. I can show you what humans create, the experiences we put into our art. There was another conference among the aliens, this one longer, more intense. Tanya could sense disagreement, though she couldn't understand the words. Finally, the commander turned to her. We will test your proposal, human. But understand this. If your arts prove insufficient to nourish us, we will have no choice but to proceed with alternative methods. Tanya nodded, trying to hide her fear. I understand. Tomorrow I can take you to the bookstore after hours. Show you our literature, our poetry. It contains some of our most profound experiences. Very well, the commander agreed. Tomorrow night we will evaluate your species' creative output. After the delegation departed, returning to their ship in that same disconcerting way they had arrived, Vex remained behind. Tanya collapsed onto her couch, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. Will it work? She asked Vex. Can your people really feed on our art? I do not know, Vex admitted, sitting beside her. But in my time observing humans, I have been affected by your stories. Your music, I believe. There is something there, something that might sustain us in a different way. And if it doesn't work? Vex was quiet for a long moment. Then I will help you. Find a way to protect your species. Tanya looked at her in surprise. You would betray your own kind. I am not certain, Vex said. But I have spent time among your people. I have seen how you live, how you care for each other, how you create. I find myself reluctant to see that extinguished. Tanya reached out hesitantly and touched Vex's hand. The alien skin was cool, smooth like polished stone. Thank you, she said simply. The next day, Tanya went to work at the bookstore as usual. She moved through her shift in a daze, shelving books, helping customers, all while knowing that tonight the fate of humanity might be decided right here among these shelves. Her boss, Kelly, noticed her distraction. You okay, Tanya? You seem a million miles away today. Tanya managed to smile. Just didn't sleep well last night. Was weird. Weird how? Kelly asked, leaning on the counter. Just strange dreams, Tanya lied. Listen, Kelly, would it be okay if I stayed late tonight after closing? I want to reorganize the poetry section. Kelly raised an eyebrow. Since when are you so passionate about organizational systems? Since I noticed how messed up that section is, Tanya said, trying to sound convincing. People are always putting books back in the wrong place. It's driving me crazy. Knock yourself out, Kelly said with a shrug. Just remember to set the alarm when you leave. As closing time approached, Tanya's anxiety increased. She wondered what would happen if the aliens rejected her proposal. If they decided human art wasn't sufficient nourishment, would they begin their invasion immediately? Would anyone believe her if she tried to warn them? The store closed at 9. Kelly left with a wave and a reminder about the alarm. Tanya waited, watching the clock. The aliens had agreed to arrive at 10, giving her time to prepare. She moved through the store selecting books she thought might contain the most powerful emotional experiences. Poetry mostly, but also some novels. Memoirs, works that captured the depth of human experience. At precisely 10, the air in the bookstore shifted. 3 tall figures materialized among the shelves: Commander Nix Lix and the third alien whose name Tanya now learned was Rix. They looked around at the rows of books with expressions that might have been curiosity or might have been disdain. Tanya couldn't read their alien features well enough to be sure. "These are your repositories of experience?" the commander asked. "Books." Tanya said, "Yes, some of our most profound experiences and emotions are captured in these pages." She guided them to the poetry section first, picking up a volume of Emily Dickinson. This woman lived a quiet, isolated life, but her inner world was vast. Her poems capture feelings of loneliness, hope, despair, love, in ways that still resonate with people over a century later. She opened the book and offered it to the commander. The alien took it, their long fingers turning the pages with surprising delicacy. Tanya Morgan knew something was wrong the moment she opened her apartment door. The air felt electric, charged with an energy that made the hair on her arms stand up. She paused in the doorway, her finger hovering over the light switch. A strange scent filled the air, something like metal and flowers mixed together. She should have run. She should have closed the door and called for help. Instead, Tanya stepped inside. Her curiosity had always been her greatest strength and her greatest weakness. The moonlight spilled through her kitchen window, illuminating a tall figure standing perfectly still. The figure was female, but not human. Too tall, at least 7 feet, with limbs that seemed slightly too long. Her skin gleamed like polished obsidian, reflecting the moonlight with an iridescent quality. But it was her eyes that made Tanya's breath catch in her throat. Vertical pupils like a cat's set in irises the color of fresh blood. The alien woman moved with liquid grace, her movements too smooth to be human. She opened her mouth, revealing teeth that tapered to needlepoints. Her nostrils flared as she drew in Tanya's scent, and then something unexpected happened. The creature recoiled, pressing herself against the far wall of the kitchen. Her expression shifted from predatory to confused. "Your blood." The alien whispered, her voice like wind through autumn leaves. "It smells wrong." Tanya stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. She should be terrified, and part of her was. But another part, a stronger part, was fascinated. Wrong how? She found herself asking. The creature tilted her head at an unnatural angle, studying Tanya with those unsettling red eyes. "You should be afraid." "I am," Tanya admitted. "But you backed away from me. That seems backwards for a predator." A long silence stretched between them. The alien seemed to be considering something, weighing options. Tanya noticed that despite her fearsome appearance, there was intelligence in those eyes, a calculating awareness. "I'm called Vex." The alien finally said, "I am a gory from a world you could not pronounce with your limited vocal apparatus. I came here to hunt, to feed. But your blood, it carries something I have never encountered before. Something dangerous. I'm just a normal woman," Tanya said, taking a careful step into her apartment and closing the door behind her. She wasn't sure why she did this. Maybe to prevent the creature from escaping. Maybe to prevent anyone else from seeing what was in her kitchen. "I work at a bookstore. I have student loans. I feed stray cats. Nothing special about me." Vex shook her head, a too fluid motion. "You are not normal. Your blood carries what we call the void between stars, a nothingness that burns. It would poison me." "So, you're like vampires," Tanya said, trying to process this information. "You drink blood." "Your folklore is not entirely inaccurate," Vex admitted. "We feed on blood, but more specifically on the memories, emotions, and experiences carried within it. The fluid itself is merely a vessel for what truly nourishes us." Tanya moved slowly to her living room, keeping her eyes on the alien. She gestured to her couch. "Would you like to sit down? This conversation feels too strange to have standing in my kitchen." The alien hesitated, then followed, moving with that unsettling grace. She perched awkwardly on Tanya's couch, her long limbs not quite fitting comfortably on furniture designed for humans. "Why are you here?" Tanya asked. On Earth, I mean. I am a scout, Vex explained. The first wave. My kind, they search for compatible species whose blood carries experiences worth consuming. Your kind was identified as potentially ideal. Rich emotional lives, complex memories, deep connections. You live briefly, but intensely. A chill ran down Tanya's spine. So you're planning an invasion? That was the plan. Vex agreed, her red eyes glowing faintly in the dimly lit room. But your blood complicates matters. I must report this anomaly to my superiors. Will they hurt me? Tanya asked. Experiment on me. Vex seemed to consider this. Perhaps. But I think they will be more interested in understanding why your blood carries this protection. A natural immunity suggests prior contact, yet we have no record of a Gori visiting this world before. So what happens now? Tanya asked. Now I must contact my ship. Vex said. It is hidden in the forest outside your settlement. I must analyze your blood properly, understand what makes it toxic to my kind. Tanya wasn't sure why she agreed to help. Perhaps it was shock. Perhaps it was the realization that she might be humanity's best hope if an invasion was truly coming. Or perhaps it was simple curiosity. The same curiosity that had led her to step into her apartment instead of running away. The next day, Tanya called in sick to the bookstore. She watched as Vex used a small device to take a sample of her blood. The technology was unlike anything Tanya had ever seen, sleek and organic, seeming to pulse, with its own rhythm. Your ancestors survived something terrible, Vex explained as she studied the readouts from the device. A plague, perhaps, something that rewrote parts of your genetic code. Not all humans would carry this adaptation, but many, might those with similar ancestry to yours. What ancestry is that? Tanya asked. I'm just a mix of European backgrounds as far as I know. Nothing special? The markers suggest the adaptation occurred approximately 7,000 years ago, Vex said, a time when your species was still primitive. The adaptation is subtle. It would have no effect on your daily life, no visible manifestation. But to my kind, it makes your blood like acid. Tanya tried to process this information. So I'm poisonous too? You, not just you, Vex said. Potentially many humans with similar genetic markers and not just poisonous repellent. Your blood smells wrong to us. It triggers an instinctive aversion. So the invasion, Tanya began, would be more complicated than anticipated. Vex finished. If enough humans carry this adaptation, it would make feeding difficult, dangerous even. Over the next few days, Tanya and Vex developed an uneasy alliance. The alien used her technology to analyze more of Tanya's blood to understand the precise nature of the adaptation. As they worked together, Tanya learned more about the Agori, their history, their biology, their culture. Your kind has encountered the Agori before, Vex explained one evening as they sat in Tanya's living room, not directly, but something similar. Another species that fed in a similar way. That is why your body's adapted. Not all humans, just certain bloodlines. Those who survived developed a defense. And this defense, Tanya said, could it be weaponized? Vex tilted her head. An interesting thought. You seek to protect your species. Wouldn't you do the same? Tanya asked. The alien was quiet for a long moment. Yes, I would. But I do not believe weaponization would be necessary. The adaptation itself is protection. Enough it makes your kind undesirable as food. Tanya wasn't entirely convinced, but she continued to cooperate with Vex, hoping to learn more information that might help humanity. If the worst happened, on the 5th day, Vex received a communication from her superiors. The message came through a device that seemed to materialize from within Vex's own body. The language was incomprehensible to Tanya, a series of clicks and whistles and subsonic rumbles. But Vex's reaction was clear, even to human eyes. They are coming, Vex said after the communication ended. A delegation. They wish to meet you to confirm my findings. Is that good or bad? Tanya asked. It means they take the threat seriously. Vex said, It means they recognize that an invasion may not be possible, or they want to eliminate the threat. Tanya pointed out. Me. Vex shook her head. If that were their intention, they would not announce themselves. They would simply strike. They come to negotiate. Negotiate what? A different kind of relationship. Vex said, if we cannot feed on your kind, perhaps we can find another way to coexist. Tanya looked out her apartment window at the night sky, wondering how many stars in that vast expanse housed worlds the Agori had visited, worlds they had harvested. She wondered if her ancestors had somehow encountered creatures like Vex before, if some ancient plague had actually been an attempted feeding that had gone wrong. How many humans carried this adaptation? How many might be immune to the Agori? When will they arrive? She asked finally. Tomorrow. Vex said, at nightfall they will come to this place. Tanya nodded slowly. Then we have until tomorrow to prepare. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Tanya found herself caught between two worlds. Her normal life working at the bookstore, paying bills, feeding her cat Mittens, and her new role as humanity's unofficial ambassador to an alien species that had until recently planned to feed on them. Vex remained with her, serving as a translator and guide to Agori culture, while the commander and the others returned to their ship to communicate with their homeworld. The decision to pursue cultural exchange rather than invasion required approval from the highest levels of Agori society. How long will it take? Tanya asked Vex one evening as they sat in her living room. Mittens had finally stopped hiding from Vex, and now watched the alien with cautious curiosity from the back of the couch. Communication across such distances is not instantaneous even with our technology, Vex explained. And the discussion will be contentious. Our society has operated one way for thousands of years. Change comes slowly. But in the meantime, no invasion. No invasion. Vex confirmed. The commander has authority to suspend operations pending review. Tanya rubbed her temples, trying to process everything. So, what do we do while we wait? We continue to gather evidence, Vex said. Demonstrate that human creative works can provide sustainable nourishment, and we prepare for the possibility of wider contact. Wider contact, Tanya repeated. You mean telling other humans about you? Eventually that will be necessary. Vex said, if we are to establish formal cultural exchange? The thought made Tanya nervous. Who would believe her? A bookstore clerk claiming to be in contact with aliens? It sounded insane. Even with Vex as proof, the panic that might ensue could destroy any chance of peaceful relations. We need to be careful about who we tell. Tanya said, start small. Someone with authority, but also someone open-minded. Someone who won't immediately call the military. You have someone in mind, Vex observed. Tanya nodded. My regular customer, Dr. Eleanor Westchez, a professor of anthropology at the university, studies first contact scenarios between human cultures. She is always talking about how those lessons might apply to extraterrestrial contact if it ever happened. A scholar of contact protocols, Vex said thoughtfully. Yes, that could be beneficial. The next day, Tanya sent Dr. West an email asking if she could come by the bookstore after hours to discuss something important. She was vague about the details, only saying it related to Dr. West's field of study. The professor responded quickly, agreeing to meet that evening. Tanya was nervous as closing time approached. She had asked Kelly if she could use the store's back office for a private meeting, and her boss had agreed, though, with obvious curiosity. Vex waited there out of sight until the store closed. Dr. West arrived precisely at 7. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and keen gray eyes that missed nothing. She had been coming to the bookstore for years, often special ordering obscure academic texts or spending hours browsing the anthropology section. This is all very mysterious, Tanya, she said, as Tanya locked the front door. Your email sounded quite urgent. It is, Tanya said, leading her toward the back office. But it's also going to sound completely crazy. I need you to promise to hear me out before you decide. I'm insane. Dr. West raised an eyebrow. Intriguing you have. My word. Tanya took a deep breath as they reached the office door. Dr. West, what I'm about to show you will change everything you thought you knew about our place in the universe. She pushed open the door, revealing Vex, who stood waiting her tall, form impossible to mistake for human. To her credit, Dr. West didn't scream or run. She froze, her eyes widening as she took in the alien figure before her. Fascinating, she whispered after a long moment. Truly fascinating. The meeting lasted hours. Dr. West moved quickly from shock to intense scientific curiosity. She questioned Vex about Agori biology, culture, history, technology, writing notes furiously in a small notebook. She was particularly interested in the Agorist method of feeding on experiences and the possibility of sustaining themselves on human creative works. The implications are staggering, she said finally, sitting back in her chair. Not just for humanity, but for your species as well. A symbiotic relationship, rather than a predator-prey dynamic. That's what we're hoping for, Tanya said. But we need help figuring out how to introduce the Agori to humanity without causing panic. Dr. West nodded thoughtfully. It needs to be controlled, gradual, a small group. First, academic scientists, perhaps carefully selected government officials, people who can approach this rationally. Would you help us? Tanya asked. Your expertise in first contact scenarios? My dear, Dr. West said with a smile. You are offering me the opportunity to apply my life's work to actual extraterrestrial contact. I wouldn't miss it for the world. With Dr. West's help, they began to develop a plan. The professor had connections in both academic and government circles, people she trusted to respond rationally to the revelation of alien contact. She suggested a small initial meeting with just 3 carefully selected individuals, a linguist, a cultural anthropologist, and a representative from the State Department with whom she had worked in the past. We need to control the narrative from the beginning, Dr. West explained. Frame this as an opportunity for humanity, not a threat. And we need to understand the Agori better, their language, their social structures, their values. Only then can we hope to establish meaningful dialogue. The meeting was arranged for the following week. It would take place at Dr. West's home, a secluded property outside the city, where they could ensure privacy. Tanya spent the intervening days helping Vex prepare. They worked on how to explain Agori concepts in terms humans could understand, how to address the obvious fear their appearance might provoke. The night before the meeting, Tanya found herself unable to sleep. She sat on her small balcony looking up at the stars, wondering which one might be the Agori homeworld. You are troubled, Vex said, joining her. The alien had become adept at reading human emotions during their time together. I keep thinking about what happens if this goes wrong, Tanya admitted. If people react with fear instead of curiosity, if your leaders decide human art isn't enough and the invasion is back on. There is always risk in change, Vex said. For both our species, but there is also possibility. The possibility of something neither of us has experienced before. A true exchange of cultures, minds, experiences. Tanya turned to look at the alien who had become something like a friend. Why are you helping us? When we first met, you were here to scout for an invasion. Vex was quiet. For a long moment. Among my kind, I am considered unusual. I question, I doubt, I wonder if there might be a better way than what we have always done. In your terms, I am a radical, perhaps even a revolutionary. Is that why they sent you here alone? Perhaps, Vex acknowledged. Or perhaps it was fate that I would be the one to find you, the one human whose blood carries the adaptation, that I would be the one to discover an alternative. The meeting with Dr. West's contacts went better than Tanya had dared. Hope. There was initial shock, of course. The linguist Dr. Sophia Patel actually fainted when Vex first appeared, but once the initial shock wore off, their scientific curiosity took over. Dr. Patel was fascinated by the Agori language, working with Vex to understand its structure and meaning. The cultural anthropologist Dr. Marcus Wong focused on Agori, social hierarchies, their values, their history. The State Department representative Lisa Chambers remained more reserved, but Tanya could see her, mind working, calculating the implications, the possibilities, the risks. This must be handled at the highest levels, Chambers said finally. But carefully, very carefully, the wrong approach could lead to panic, global destabilization. We need more time, Dr. Wong agreed. More understanding before this becomes public knowledge. But it will become public eventually, Tanya pointed out. We can't keep this secret forever. No. Chambers acknowledged. But we can control how it happens. Prepare the public establish protocols for contact. They developed a timeline, a careful step-by-step approach to wider revelation. First, a small team of scientists would be brought in to study the Agori and their technology, then key government officials. Then, a carefully orchestrated public announcement. But all of this depended on the Agori leadership agreeing to pursue cultural exchange rather than invasion. 3 days later, Commander Nix returned. Tanya was at the bookstore when she felt that now familiar shift in the air. The commander materialized between the fiction and self-help sections, fortunately after closing hours. Your leaders have responded, Tanya asked, trying to keep her voice steady. They have, the commander said. They are intrigued by the possibility of cultural exchange. The reports of our experiences with your creative works have generated considerable interest. So, no invasion, not yet, the commander said. They have authorized an extended research period, a deeper exploration of this alternative approach. But they require more evidence, more concrete proof that human creative output can sustain our needs. How do we prove that? We must establish a more formal exchange, the commander explained. A controlled test, a group of my kind living among yours, feeding solely on your creative works for an extended period. Tanya felt a chill. Living among us. How many? 20 to start, the commander said. A small colony, a test case. 20 alien vampires living secretly on Earth. The idea was terrifying, but wasn't it better than the alternative, better than invasion? The Agori colony was established in a repurposed research facility in the New Mexico desert. Far from major population centers, yet accessible enough for the human scientists and officials involved in the project. The buildings had been modified to accommodate the aliens' taller frames and different environmental preferences. They preferred cooler temperatures and lower light levels than humans found comfortable. Tanya split her time between her increasingly neglected normal life and the facility. She had taken a leave of absence from the bookstore, telling Kelly she needed to care for a sick relative. It wasn't entirely a lie. Her entire species was potentially at risk. The cultural exchange program began in earnest. Human creative works were provided to the Agori in carefully monitored settings. Books, music, films, art from across human history and cultures. The aliens consumed these works in their own unique way, absorbing the emotional and experiential content through a process that remained mysterious to the human observers. Dr. Patel, the linguist, worked with the Agori to develop better translation protocols. While Vex and several others had learned English, many concepts remained difficult to express across species barriers. Dr. Wong, the anthropologist, documented Agori social interactions, their hierarchies, their customs. He was particularly fascinated by how they organized themselves in the absence of their normal feeding patterns. Their social structure is shifting, he explained to Tanya one evening as they observed a group of Agori discussing a collection of poetry. On their world status is determined by the quality and quantity of experiences consumed. Those with the richest feeding history hold the highest positions, but here they're all consuming the same material. Our art rather than individual humans. It's forcing them to reorganize their hierarchy based on different criteria. Is that good or bad? Tanya asked. Neither, Dr. Wong said. Just fascinating. Their society is adapting, evolving in response to this new feeding method. The most critical question remained unanswered. Could the Agori truly sustain themselves on human creative works alone? Would art, music, literature provide sufficient nourishment? For their unique biology, the colony was the test, and everything depended on its success. 3 months into the experiment, Tanya noticed changes in the Agori. Their skin, which had been uniformly obsidian, began to show subtle variations in tone and texture. Their eyes, still that unsettling red, now displayed different intensities, different patterns. The scientists monitoring their health reported changes in their biological readings, though what those changes meant remained unclear. "They're adapting," Dr. West said when Tanya pointed out these changes. "Just as Dr. Wong observed in their social structures, their biology is adapting to this new form of nourishment. But are they getting enough?" Tanya asked. "Are they healthy?" That, Dr. West admitted, is harder to determine. We have limited baseline data on Agori biology. Commander Nix assures us they are maintaining adequate health, but there are signs of stress. We need more time, more data. 6 months in, the first serious problem arose. One of the younger Agori became ill, her skin losing its luster, her eyes dimming. She stopped participating in the cultural consumption sessions, becoming withdrawn, isolated. "What's wrong with her?" Tanya asked Vex as they watched the medical team, both human and Agori, examining the sick alien. "She is experiencing what we call the fading," Vex explained. "Her system is not adapting to the new form of nourishment. She craves direct feeding. The experiences contained in your art are too diluted for her. What happens if she doesn't get what she needs?" "She will not die," Vex said, "but she will diminish, become less than she was. Her consciousness will fragment, her identity fade. Can you help her?" "There are supplements," Vex said, "synthesized from our ship's stores, but they are limited and they only slow the process, they do not reverse it." The situation created the first real crisis for the exchange program. The sick Agori continued to deteriorate despite the supplements. The human scientists worked frantically to understand what was happening, to find a solution, but their knowledge of Agori biology remained limited. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Tanya herself. She had been thinking about something Vex had said when they first met. That the Agori fed not just on blood but on the experiences, emotions, memories carried within it. That human creative works contained some of the same elements, but perhaps not all. What if the problem isn't the content, but the delivery method? She suggested during an emergency meeting with the scientific team and Agori representatives. What if we need to find a way to make the experience more direct, more immersive? Explain. Commander Nix said. We've been giving you books, music, films, Tanya said, but you're experiencing them passively. Reading, listening, watching. What if you need to experience them actively? Participatory art, interactive experiences. Dr. West's eyes lit up. Virtual reality, immersive theater, interactive installations, art that doesn't just communicate experience but creates it. The team quickly assembled a new approach. Virtual reality systems were brought to the facility along with experts in immersive experience design. The sick Agori was the first test subject. She was placed in a fully immersive VR environment, a simulation of a powerful human emotional experience, in this case falling in love. The results were immediate and dramatic. The Agori's condition improved within hours. Her skin regained its luster. Her eyes brightened. She emerged from the simulation more vital, more present than she had been in weeks. It worked, Tanya said, watching as the alien moved with renewed energy. The immersive experience had fed her more effectively. Not just more. Effectively, Vex said. Different aspects of experience. Different nutrients, if you will. The participatory nature, the agency involved. That seems to be a critical component, one that was missing in passive consumption. The discovery led to a complete redesign of the cultural exchange program. Immersive experiences became the cornerstone. Interactive art, virtual reality, participatory theater, improvisational music, all designed to allow the Agori to not just observe human experiences, but to engage with them directly. The colony flourished under the new approach. The physical and social changes in the Agori accelerated. They began to develop individual characteristics, distinct from each other in ways that went beyond rank or status. They began to create their own art, fusing Agori and human aesthetics into something entirely new. 9 months into the experiment, Commander Nix called a formal meeting with the human leadership team. "We have reached a decision," she announced, "based on the success of this colony. We believe cultural exchange is viable, sustainable. Not just as an alternative to invasion, but as a preferable model for interaction between our species." The room erupted in relieved excitement. The human team had been working toward this moment for months. The confirmation that the Agori could thrive on human creativity rather than human blood. "What happens now?" Lisa Chambers, the State Department representative, asked once the celebration subsided. "Now we begin the true exchange," Commander Nix said. "Not just humans providing experiences for Agori to consume, but Agori sharing our art, our technology, our knowledge with humanity, a two-way flow." "And the invasion plans?" Tanya asked the question everyone was thinking. "Suspended, indefinitely," the commander confirmed. "The High Council has been persuaded that this alternative offers greater long-term benefits, less risk, more sustainable growth." The news should have brought nothing but relief. But Tanya noticed something in the commander's phrasing. Suspended indefinitely is not the same as canceled. She pointed out. The commander fixed those red eyes on her. Perceptive as always, Tanya Morgan. "Yes, the distinction matters. The decision could be reversed if circumstances change, if the exchange proves unsustainable or insufficient. But the longer we proceed successfully, the less likely such reversal becomes. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a guarantee, but it was hope. More hope than humanity had when the Agori first arrived planning to harvest their blood and experiences. The next phase began immediately. Planning for wider contact. Carefully orchestrated revelation of the Agori presence to a slightly larger circle of humans. Preparations for the eventual public announcement. Tanya found herself at the center of it all. The human who had first suggested that the Agori might feed on art instead of blood. "You have become something of a legend among my kind," Vex told her one evening as they watched the sunset. From the facility's roof, "The human who changed everything, I just got lucky," Tanya said. "Right place, right time, right genetic adaptation." "It was more than luck," Vex insisted. "It was curiosity, openness, imagination. You could have run that first, night. Instead, you asked questions. You saw possibilities where others would have seen only threat." The expanding circle of humans who knew about the Agori now included artists, creators from various fields brought in to develop new immersive experiences. At first they were told they were working on a classified government project in experimental art therapy. Only after signing extensive non-disclosure agreements were they given the truth. Their reactions varied from terror to awe to unbridled excitement. The opportunity to create art for an alien audience to see how a completely different species responded to human creativity was unprecedented. The collaboration led to innovations in immersive experience design that would have taken decades to develop otherwise. Chaos engulfed the facility as explosions rocked the perimeter. Alarms blared and emergency lights cast everything in pulsing red shadows. Tanya ran through corridors alongside Vex, helping coordinate the evacuation. They had prepared contingency plans, but nothing like this. Nothing for armed assault by unknown forces. "This way," Dr. West called, guiding a group of Agori toward the underground tunnels that had been built as emergency exits. "The vehicles are waiting." The plan was desperate, but it was all they had. Split the Agori into small groups, each with human escorts. Scatter them to safe houses across the country, places prepared for just such an emergency. Then regroup, find out who had attacked them, and why. Tanya and Vex led one such. Group 6 Agori, including the young one who had first fallen ill, moving through dark tunnels guided by emergency lighting toward a loading bay where vehicles waited. Who would do this? Tanya asked as they ran. Who even knew enough to attack? Many possibilities, Vex said. Rogue military elements, corporate interests seeking our technology, religious extremists fearing what we represent. The list is long. They reached the loading bay to find Dr. Patel the linguist already there with 3 unmarked black vans. Hurry, she called. We have maybe 5 minutes before they reach this level. Tanya helped the Agori into the vehicles, their tall forms awkward in spaces designed for humans. Vex took the wheel of one van, Tanya another, Dr. Patel the third. They had planned escape routes, memorized safe houses designated, but now everything felt uncertain, chaotic, as they drove away from the facility through a service tunnel that emerged miles from the main entrance. Tanya saw smoke rising behind them, the night sky lit by flames. Someone had set fire to the main building. Command Center, do you copy? She spoke into the secure radio they had given her. Anyone from primary team, please respond. Static. Then Commander Nick's voice broken by interference. Scatter protocol initiated. Maintain radio silence. Rendezvous at backup location in 72 hours. If compromised, go deeper. Go deeper. It was the final contingency. If even the backup plans failed, the Agori and their human allies were to disappear completely. Cut all contact live off-grid until new secure communication could be established. Tanya drove through the night desert roads, turning onto highways, then back to side roads, following a randomized pattern designed to lose any pursuit. The Agori in her van remained silent, their red eyes glowing faintly in the darkness, watching the human world pass by outside. A world that had almost learned of their existence in a controlled, peaceful manner, and now might discover them through violence. Instead, dawn was breaking when they reached the first safe house, a remote cabin in the mountains owned through a series of shell companies untraceable to the project. Tanya pulled the van into the garage, closing the door behind them before allowing her passengers to exit. What now? Asked one of the Agori, a female named Mix who had been part of the scientific team. We wait, Tanya said. 24 hours here. Then we move to the next location, following the scatter protocol, until we receive new instructions or the 72-hour rendezvous time arrives. And if neither happens, Tanya didn't have a good answer for that. They had plans within plans, contingencies upon contingencies, but all assumed some level of continued coordination. If that failed, if they were truly cut off, then each group would be on their own. 6 aliens with 1 human guide in a world that didn't know they existed and might react with terror if they found out. The day passed in tense waiting. The cabin had emergency supplies, food, water, basic medical equipment. It also had specialized equipment for the Agori VR systems loaded with immersive experiences to provide nourishment, a generator to power it all. Even in crisis, their feeding needs couldn't be ignored. That night, Tanya finally got through to Dr. West on the secure channel. Status report. The professor said, her voice tight with stress, safe at location 1. Tanya replied, using the coded language they had established, 6 packages intact. 1 handler, no signs of compromise. You. Safe at location 3, 4 packages. 2 handlers, minor damage to 1 package but stable. Have you heard from command? Negative. Tanya said, no contact since initial scatter order. Any news on the attack? Fragmentary. Dr. West said, not military, at least not official military. Private forces, well-equipped, well-informed internal security believes industrial espionage. Corporate interests after Agori technology. It made a kind of sense. The Agori were centuries ahead of humans in many scientific fields. Their technology would be worth trillions to whoever controlled it. Enough to fund a private army to acquire it. The announcement. Tanya asked, the revelation. Delayed indefinitely, Dr. West said. Too dangerous. Now with hostiles in play, government denying all knowledge of the facility, claiming it was a classified research station, unrelated to extraterrestrial contact. So we're back to square one, Tanya said, bitterness creeping into her voice. A year of work destroyed in one night. Not destroyed. Dr. West corrected. Delayed, complicated. We still have what matters. Most of the Agori survived. Most of the research team. We can rebuild. But first, we need to secure our position. Identify the threat. Neutralize it. After the call ended, Tanya sat outside on the cabin's porch looking up at the stars. The Agori had joined her, their tall forms eerily still in the moonlight. Your world is more complex than we anticipated, Mix observed. More divided, more fractured in purpose. That's humanity for you, Tanya said. Never unified, never moving in one direction, always competing groups with competing interests. It is not so different among the Agori, Vex said. Though we hide it better, there are those who still prefer the old ways. The hunting, the feeding. There are others who embrace change, who see cultural exchange as the future. The attack may have been aided by the former. You think Agori were involved? Tanya asked, shocked. It is possible, Vex admitted. Those who fear change. Those who see our adaptation to your art as weakness. They would prefer invasion. The old patterns, the thought was chilling. If they faced opposition from both sides, both human and Agori. The task before them seemed suddenly even more daunting. They moved to the second safe house the next day, another remote location. This one a former mining complex repurposed with living quarters deep underground. As they settled in, Tanya began to see changes in the Agori under her care. Without the regular immersive experiences from the facility, they were struggling. Their skin losing luster, their movements becoming less fluid. They need nourishment, Vex explained. The supplies we brought are limited. They were meant for emergency use only, short term. What happens if they don't get what they need? The fading, Vex said, slow at first but accelerating. We have perhaps 2 weeks before permanent damage begins. 2 weeks to somehow re-establish the program, to create a new facility, a new feeding protocol, or to find an alternative. The third day brought the scheduled rendezvous. Not in person, that would be too dangerous, but via secure communication. A conference call between the scattered groups. Commander Nix was alive, though injured in the attack. Most of the Agori had escaped with their human handlers, but the facility was destroyed. The equipment, the research, all lost. We have identified the attackers, Lisa Chambers reported. A private military corporation working for a consortium of technology companies. They learned about the Agori through a breach in our security, specifically about their advanced technology, not about the cultural exchange program. So they don't know what they're really after. Tanya said, correct. They know there are extraterrestrials. They know they have advanced technology, but they don't understand the full picture. The feeding requirements, the adaptation, the potential for peaceful exchange, which makes them even more dangerous. Commander Nix observed. If they capture any of my kind, they will not understand our needs. They will see only potential weapons technology manufacturing processes. The situation seemed bleak, but as the conference continued, ideas began to emerge. Plans to regroup to establish a new research base, this time completely off the grid. No government involvement, no paper trail, nothing that could be traced or compromised. We need time, Dr. West said. Time to rebuild what was lost. Time to establish new security protocols. Time my people do not have. The commander pointed out. Without the feeding program, they will begin to fade. Tanya had been listening quietly, thinking about the problem from different angles. Suddenly, she sat forward. What if we don't need a facility? What if we can make the feeding mobile, distributed? Explain, the commander requested. The immersive experiences, Tanya said. They don't have to be in one place. We have the technology, VR systems, portable holofields. We can create feeding stations, small, unobtrusive, hidden in plain sight. Dr. Wong, the anthropologist, picked up the thread. Art galleries, independent theaters, small venues that could serve as fronts for Agori feeding stations. We would need a network, Dr. Patel added, a way to coordinate, to move the Agori safely between locations to maintain their health. An underground railroad, Lisa Chambers said, for aliens. The idea took shape as they talked, a distributed network of safe houses, feeding stations, each appearing to be nothing more unusual than an avant-garde art installation or experimental theater, small enough to avoid notice, numerous enough to sustain the Agori population until a more permanent solution could be found. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what they had planned, but it was adaptable, resilient, and most importantly, it could be implemented quickly.